So in this video, we're going to reflect on all the methods that we learned for solving a quadratic function. And there's quite a few that we've learned, and this year we've learned it in 4 different ways for solving quadratics. And we're going to also take a look at their pros and cons for each type. So let me split this page up into 4 sections to kind of organize our thoughts here. So let's start with the very beginning, where we started off with graphing. When it comes to graphing, usually it is great when you have something that is in vertex form. So you might remember graphing something like x minus 3 squared plus 1. So when you have an equation like this, also recognize it's a quadratic because it's squared. When you have an equation like this, it's easy to tell your shift and be able to shift in a direction. So you can plot your vertex and then plot your slope and then graph it and see where it crosses the x-axis. So some of the pros with it is, let's make a section for that, is it's great for vertex form. So if you have something that's in vertex form, you can easily graph the equation and find the vertex and slope. Cons with this is when you graph something, the graphs are not very accurate. That's one of the biggest complaints that we had in the beginning, is it's always based on your pictures. So they don't always give accurate solutions. And so that's why we had to learn something else. So oftentimes this kind of gets put in the drawer. We don't use it very often because it doesn't give out accurate numbers. So then the second thing we learned was factoring. So when it comes to factoring, a great example to use this is when you have a trinomial, or something like x squared 2x plus 1, when it's in that nice standard form and the other side's equal to 0. This is great to use for factoring, because factoring is pretty quick to use. I would say factoring is, once you have it down, you can just whip out that tool pretty easily. So it's very quick most of the time. So most people like to use it just because it's usually easier and quicker. The con with this, and what we noticed in when we were learning about quadratic formula and why we learned it in the first place, is factoring doesn't always work. Not everything is factorable. So not every quadratic is factorable. So we have to also learn something else. Another thing we learned, and we kind of don't really mention this as a method, but it is a useful one, is taking square roots. So sometimes you have simpler problems, like maybe you don't have something in standard form. Maybe it's just x squared minus 12. Like there's only 2 terms. There's fewer things going on. Or maybe it's in vertex form. So if you have something where you can easily just move stuff to the other side and then take a square root, this is what we call the square root method. So the pro with this one is it's pretty easy to try to get the square root by itself most of the time, and then just take a square root. So kind of some of the pros with this is that we can use square roots to cancel out easily the exponent 2, or the square. Cons with this is it doesn't always work. Like some things are not always so easy to move around. Like for instance, if I was given a situation like this, I would have to move over the 1, move over the 2x, but then if I were to take a square root, I'd have to take a square root of a 2x, and that would be kind of interesting to do and probably not possible. So square roots can also be very limiting when it comes to this method. So the final method, the method that's always bulletproof, is the quadratic formula. basically, to use the quadratic formula, it has to be in standard form. So if you have something that's in vertex form and you want to use the quadratic formula, you would have to maybe take the exponent of your equation and try to blow it up and then simplify it down to a trinomial. But then you could use the quadratic formula. So quadratic formulas are only used for something that's in standard form, but anything can be changed into standard form. So the pro with this is that it always works. Always works. Con with this is that it relies on a formula, and the formula is kind of long. So a lot of people don't like spending a lot of time on a formula and simplifying. So those are some cons that people might have. In the end of things, I would definitely want to remember how to use quadratic formula because it's the most popular question that pops up in algebra skills and also in SAT and ACT problems. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found this reflection helpful. Until next time, guys. Bye.